zone outside of what impinges on them is you pick the best story. Because no one could find out. There was no science, there was no historical archives, there was no responsible journalism. So we grown up in an era since the Enlightenment where we expect that you can find out these things, that there is a truth to be found, that's what we have, why we have science, that's why we have investigative journalism, that's why we have professional historians. But it's just not the natural human way of thinking. And so I would flip the question around is how do you get people to the mindset that presumably you and I share, that you can't believe anything you want.
Yeah.
Some things are true, and it really is virtuous to believe things that are true by our best lights.
But is that something that's been static over the years, or are we in a worse place or a better place now? I mean, you have a number of people that point to technology and say, this is screwing everything up. And then you look backward and say, well, we've always had conspiracy theorists. We've had the John Birch Society. We've had these things for years. Is it just that more people have access to this now because of the internet and social media? Or are we better off than we were previously?
Yeah, it's a good question. There has been a study. So I try to base answers to questions like that and other questions of have things gotten better or worse on do we actually have data sets that could lead to an informed answer to that question. The only one I know of is a researcher named Joseph Ushinsky looked at letters to the New York Times and I think other papers over a 100-year span and found no change in the proportion of conspiracy theories. However, I think his investigation ended in 2010 prior to the explosion of social media, so we don't know if things have gotten worse there. But it is a constant temptation. There have been, of course, anti-Semitic conspiracy theories for centuries. The oldest hatred, right? Yeah. Anti-Catholic conspiracy theories and anti-Freemason conspiracy theories.
Obviously, we saw a huge rise, and again, this is not data, this is my hunch, during COVID-19, which makes a certain amount of sense, right? We're all stuck at home.
Right.
A pandemic that we don't understand.
Yes.
Scientists don't understand it. And there was an effort by a lot of people to say the truth is static from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And we don't want people going outside of that. And let's take them off of YouTube, demonetize them, take them off of Twitter. And just, in some ways, just kind of shame some of these people. Is that an effective way? I mean, because I suspect that people have less trust in science.
I think that's right. I mean, I don't even think that was the most egregious instance. Probably the most egregious was telling people that you should not get together in crowds for MAGA rallies, but it's okay to get in crowds for Black Lives Matter rallies because the cause is so much more just.
I remember the person that defended this who said it is a type of pandemic, racism.
Yes, right.
Okay.
So, I mean, that is a way of signaling, blaring that the public health establishment is a house organ of the political left. I don't know how widely that message was received, but it would be absolutely toxic to the idea that the public health establishment is a disinterested source of information about public health. But you're right that the demonetization, the deplatforming was wrong for a couple of reasons. Just wrong as a precedent. That is, if you do have protected speech, again, there are exceptions like fraud and extortion and sexual harassment. None of these were those. So it's just a bad precedent. But even worse, we now realize that some of the so-called misinformation may have been closer to the truth than the advisories from the public health establishment. Now, this doesn't mean that the public health establishment was corrupt or conspiratorial. It just means everyone is fallible about everything. We start out in a state of ignorance. The rationale for free speech is that's how we learn stuff. And we now realize that many of the advisories of make your own cloth mask or
don't wear a mask initially.
Don't wear a mask, save them for the surgeons. Or many of the social distancing restrictions, closing down beaches, keeping kids.
That was a wild one. The beaches and playgrounds.
Okay. So I mean, the idea people reasonably thought what they're trying to do is exert control when something that is patently has no redeeming purpose in terms of public health.
Yes.
But it
has some kind of it's a tribal thing in the sense that when I saw people, and still do, wearing masks outside. It's usually in a social class in an area.
Yeah, so I spent a year in Berkeley on sabbatical, and there you'd see people on bicycles with a mask and no helmet.
Yeah.
So getting it exactly backwards.
We can get into the probability thing in the rationality book, right?
Yeah, right. But so some of how are we going to know if some of the advisories are wrong? It's because some people say they're wrong, and we got to show whether they themselves are wrong.
So is there a rationality to conspiracy theory sometimes? I mean, do people get pushed towards conspiracy because the public health establishment or, any establishment does a series of things that invite suspicion? And the average person is just going to be like, I imagine there's some big kind of apparatus that's trying to screw me over. Is there a slight rationality to conspiracy theory sometimes?
It depends. It depends on the conspiracy theory. I mean, if it's just like two government officials both trying to hide something, well, that happens all the time.
Conspiracy,
or four.
Yeah.
But if it's 9/11 was faked, the so-called truther movement, then it's the conspiracies are preposterous on the face of them in terms of how many things would have to go perfectly for the conspiracy both to succeed and be undetected since, no stings, no defectors, no screw-ups. And we know what can go wrong will go wrong, and for 137 steps to go perfectly is pretty unlikely.
That's what I got from the rationality book is that as you expand the number of things involved, the better the story, the less likely it is, because a good story has lots of detail fleshing it out, and of course every detail you add multiplies the probability, and multiplying that is a number less than 1 by another number less than 1, resulting in a still smaller number. This is something pointed out by Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in their famous conjunction fallacy, where the example now kind of known to every intro psych student, and for that matter reader of Kahneman's bestseller Thinking Fast and Slow, is if you present a stereotype like Linda. So it's a bit of an anachronistic name because it's kind of a baby boomer name. We'll still call her Linda. She's a social justice warrior and anti-nuclear and Black Lives Matter, and majored in philosophy, very bright and articulate. What is the probability that she is a bank teller? They say, what is the probability she's a bank teller and activist, active in the feminist movement? People say, well, it's more likely she's a feminist bank teller than a bank teller, which of course violates the law of probability, that the probability of A and B has to be less than the probability of A. But we get captured by stereotypes. Tversky and Kahneman called it representativeness, but we can just call it thinking by stereotype and not taking into account base rates, probabilities. Now, the way this plays itself out in conspiracy theories, but not just conspiracy theories, also for lawyers' arguments for the prosecution or defense, is you spin a plausible story. And again, contradicting the laws of probability that say every detail you add to a story has to reduce the probability that the entire story is true. As audience is receptive to a good story, the more details you add, the more plausible the story is, and the higher the probability people give it. Now, the added absurdity to most conspiracy theories, aside from the fact that in addition to the number of things that have to go right for the conspiracy to have succeeded, is that usually part of this conspiracy is a massive attempt to suppress the truth. And here are these guys, on their card tables on street corners and handing out leaflets, and how come they haven't been sent to the gulag if there's a conspiracy to hide the truth? I mean, it's an odd thing. I mean, if you really want to ruin a dinner party, which I really enjoy doing, you can say something that sounds pretty inoffensive, that Lee Harvey Oswald shot John F. Kennedy. You're the crazy one in the room.
Right, yes.
Right? It is very hard. That is true. A conspiracy theory that is believed, I think, by 75% of Americans.
That is true.
And the power of an Oliver Stone movie or just the popular culture can really make people forget about probability and say that all of these things that would have to happen, it's nearly impossible. When Lee Harvey Oswald, who had previously, 2 months before, tried to kill General Walker in one of the heads of the John Birch Society, seems pretty obvious.
Well, it's true, and it really just shows the difference between our thirst for accurate truth and our thirst for a good story. Because the thing is that the Kennedy assassination, it's a crummy story. I mean, some pathetic schmuck kills the leader of the free world, much beloved. I mean, what kind of stupid story is that? And of course, the fact that it's true is often just doesn't register. I'd rather believe the story that they're nefarious forces.
So why do people believe these things? I mean, why do smart people believe these things?
Yeah.
I mean, smart people believe very stupid things. Everybody knows the George Orwell quote.
Yes.
Something so dumb only an intellectual could believe it. What is that? What is the instinct that make people believe stupid things?
In general, smart people tend to be more resistant to cognitive illusions, fallacies, and biases. One exception being the my side bias, namely, you give a pass to errors in an argument that makes your own coalition look good and makes the other coalition look stupid and evil. And there, people on the left and right are equally susceptible, and it is more or less independent of intelligence. It goes back to the artificiality of the moment in which we think we're living in, at least, or we like to live in, namely that you can determine the truth about who killed JFK. Mm-hmm. That is, there's forensics, there's arguments like Gerald Posner, which are pretty convincing, but for most of history, the documentary record, the forensics, the ballistics, all that, the Zapruder film, none of that was available, and so it almost was, as we would say.
Evening. Can you hear me? Welcome to the latest in the series of hiring lectures. The series is named in honor of Professor Leroy Eyring, who was an ASU Regents professor and chairman of the department, and contributed importantly during his tenure as chairman to the growing reputation and excellence of the department. Today's speaker is Professor Jack Shostak. Jack is a university professor and professor of chemistry at the University of Chicago, and an investigator at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. Prior to this year, Jack was an employee at Harvard University and at Harvard Medical School. He had multiple appointments at Harvard and carried out all of his duties in a distinguished fashion. His training was initially at McGill University for his bachelor's degree, and then he moved to Cornell and worked with Ray Wu on his PhD thesis subject. Thereafter, he started his career all in the Boston area, had a number of positions over a period of years at the Farber Cancer Center, Harvard Medical School, and then at Mass General. And while he was there, he carried out a few things that some of you have probably heard about. He, for example, worked on genetics and biochemistry of DNA recombination, which led to the double-strand break repair model for mitotic recombination. In parallel, he made fundamental contributions to our understanding of telomere structure and function, and the role of telomere maintenance in preventing cellular senescence. For this work and sharing it with two other individuals, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for his work. Most people would be satisfied with that. Jack went on to just as remarkable things in more recent years. I'll abbreviate it for this particular introduction, since I have to introduce him again tomorrow, and I'll talk about it in more detail then. But in the 1990s, Jack and his colleagues developed in vitro selection as a tool for the isolation of functional RNA, DNA, and proteins. Simple concept, but incredibly powerful for finding molecules with special activity of function. Even though it's a discovery of a few decades now, it's still increasing in its utilization and the extent to which the world relies on that basic technique to find new and highly potent and selective molecules for specific utilizations. Since the year 2000, approximately, his research interests have focused on self-replicating systems and the origin of life. And this leads us immediately to the title of this evening's lecture, namely, The Origin of Life, Not as Hard as It Looks. Please join me in welcoming Jack.
And thank you very much, Sid, for your very kind introduction. Thanks for inviting me to come back to ASU and talk to people again. I've had a great day talking with lots of different people about all kinds of exciting new things. So, in today's lecture, I'm going to try to give not a comprehensive overview of the origin of life, but sort of focus on some of the things that I find particularly interesting and maybe try to give some idea of where we've made progress and what kinds of things have held us back from, say, maybe moving as quickly as we would like. So what you see on the slide here is just a schematic of our conception of what a really simple primordial cell might have looked like. Just a kind of a lipid envelope with some small bits of genetic information on the inside. And this looks simple. I mean, it's obviously a stripped down version of a modern cell. It's got the important things except for proteins. But there's an enormous number of questions that arise if you try to think about how something like this could have emerged from the chemistry of the early Earth. And then, even if you get to this stage, then what, right? How did it lead subsequently to the evolution of more and more complex forms of life? So I was talking to a few people before giving this lecture, and they said that it's always interesting for people to hear how you got into a field. So I'll try to bring that out a bit. I thought about different ways of beginning this talk, and I could have, everything, of course, worked before while we were setting up, but now I can't advance the slides. Okay, I can use this. Good. All right. Okay. So I thought about beginning by talking about exoplanets, because after all, that's been one of the just most amazing advances in science in the last 2 decades. We have a catalog now of over 5,000 planets orbiting different stars. There must, by extrapolation, be millions of very Earth-like planets out there in our galaxy alone. And of course, we'd all like to know if there's life on any of those planets, or is it so hard to get to life that maybe we're the only place in the galaxy or even the universe where there's life, right? But I'm not going to talk more about that. I'm going to instead, I also thought, well, I could talk about life being a far from equilibrium phenomenon, right? And there's so many interesting questions. How does that generate local order of the kind that you see in life, like these incredibly complicated metabolic pathways, and everything depends on the input of energy into the system in the right way. But you have Paul Davies and Sarah Walker here who can tell you all about that from their work. So instead, I decided to talk about life from the point of view of information, because that's really how I got into this field and got interested and obsessed with it, really. So when we talk about information, it can be talked about in a lot of different ways, right? So this obviously goes back, sorry, I'm in trouble with this, to at the beginning from Shannon, classical information theory, how much information does it take to specify a given string of symbols? And then that led to advances in compression technology, which I think mostly stem from Kolmogorov algorithms, which is what's the shortest algorithm or computer program that can actually regenerate a given string. But in biology, we don't really care so much about the actual sequence of symbols in a string, right? We all have about 3 billion base pairs of information in our DNA. I mean, it's not really that much if you put it on your smartphones, right? But what's important about it are the parts of it that actually code for something useful. And even those parts, the exact sequence is not usually what's important, right? Because there are many positions in the sequence that don't matter, that can be anything. There are others that co-vary. And so the actual amount of information to specify, say, a given functional tRNA or a given functional protein is less. And even that is not exactly what you need or should be thinking about. In a biological system, and just like in a conversation between two people, what matters is the meaning of the string, right?
What was the Earth like when it saw the birth of life? A question that has intrigued science for centuries. Today, most scientists insist that it was born from a simple chemical reaction, which chaotically transformed non-living matter into the first living cell. Nevertheless, this explanation is insufficient in the absence of concrete evidence, even for its most ardent supporters. Today, every corner of the Earth is full of life. From the poles to the equator, from deep caves to mountain ranges, from tropical forests to volcanoes, at least primitive organisms can be found everywhere. Animals, plants, fungi, and bacteria in search of living space have adapted to the harshest conditions. However, scientists believe that for most of its history, the Earth has looked like a rather inhospitable place. When life first appeared on Earth about 3.8 billion years ago, the planet looked very different from what we know today. At that time, the Earth's surface was mostly water, with small archipelagos and undeveloped land masses. The atmosphere was also very different from today's, with a high proportion of gases such as methane, ammonia, and carbon dioxide. These gases were produced by massive volcanic eruptions and chemical reactions in the primitive oceans. There was also very little oxygen in the atmosphere, because photosynthetic organisms capable of producing oxygen had not yet appeared. Dear traveler, welcome. Today we are going on an incredible journey through time to the origins of life. But before leaving for a new adventure, think about liking the video and subscribing to the channel so you don't miss anything. Thank you, and have a nice trip. Scientists use a variety of methods to study the environmental conditions on Earth when life first appeared. including the study of rocks and fossils. The most direct way to learn about the structure of the Earth's crust and its history is to study rocks directly, observing their composition and position in the crust. Thus, scientists can study rocks and fossils to determine the environmental conditions that existed at the time, 3.8 billion years ago. The rocks have different origins. How they form can often be told by the rocks themselves, if they are properly compared to rocks that are forming before our eyes today and whose origin is clear. For example, the chemical composition of the rocks can indicate the levels of oxygen, carbon dioxide, and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere at that time. Also, if the rock contains corals or shells, similar to those living in the sea today, it is concluded that the rock was formed on the seafloor. If the leaves and trunks of plants are imprinted on the layers of clay or sandstone, we must deduce that these rocks have accumulated somewhere on land, perhaps at the bottom of a lake, into which plants have fallen. Fossils can also be used to judge the depths of the ancient sea. For example, corals live in shallow marine coastal environments. Therefore, coral limestones indicate a shallow sea. However, the paleontological method has significant limitations in cases where the rocks contain new fossil, organic remains, or where these remains are not characteristic. Continental deposits, such as those in river valleys and lakes, contain far fewer fossils than marine rocks, making age determination much more difficult and less accurate. Scientists can analyze isotopes in rocks, fossils, and sediments.
Where are we right now, Paul?
Lex, we are in the middle of nowhere.
It's the Amazon jungle. There's vegetation, there's
remote far light the entire.
The following is a conversation with Paul Rosalie, his second time on the podcast. But this time, we did the conversation deep in the Amazon jungle. I traveled there to hang out with Paul, and it turned out to be an adventure of a lifetime. I will post a video capturing some aspects of that adventure in a week or so. It included everything from getting lost in dense, unexplored wilderness with no contact to the outside world to taking very high doses of ayahuasca, and much more. Paul, by the way, aside from being my good friend, is a naturalist, explorer, author, and is someone who has dedicated his life to protecting the rainforest. For this mission, he founded Jungle Keepers. You can help him if you go to junglekeepers.org. This trip, for me, was life-changing. It expanded my understanding of myself and of the beautiful world I'm fortunate to exist in with all of you. So, I'm glad I went, and I'm glad I made it out alive. This is the Lex Friedman Podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Paul Rosalie. I can't believe we're actually here.
I can't believe you actually came.
And I can't believe you forced me to wear a suit.
That was the people's choice, trust me.
All right. We've been through quite a lot over the last few days.
We've been through a bit.
Let me ask you a ridiculous question. What are all the creatures right now, if they wanted to, could cause us harm?
The thing is, the Amazon rainforest has been described as the greatest natural battlefield on Earth because there's more life here than anywhere else, which means that everything here is fighting for survival. The trees are fighting for sunlight. The animals are fighting for prey. Everybody's fighting for survival. And so everything that you see here, everything around us will be killed, eaten, digested, recycled at some point. The jungle is really just a giant churning machine of death, and life is kind of this moment of stasis where you maintain this collection of cells in a particular DNA sequence, and then it gets digested again and recycled back and renamed into everything. And so the things in this forest, while they don't want to hurt us, there are things that are heavily defended because, for instance, a giant anteater needs claws to fight off a jaguar. A stingray needs a stinger on its tail, which is basically a serrated knife with venom on it to deter anything that would hunt that stingray. Even the catfish have pectoral fins that have razor long, steak knife-sized defense systems. Then you have, of course, the jaguars, the harpy eagles, the piranha, the candiru fish that can swim up a penis, lodge themselves inside. It's the Amazon rainforest. The thing is, as you've learned this week, nothing here wants to get us, with the exception of maybe mosquitoes. Every other animal just wants to eat and exist in peace. That's it.
But there is, each of those animals, like you described, have a kind of radius of defense.
Yeah.
So if you accidentally step into its home, into that radius, it can cause harm.
Or make them feel threatened.
Make them feel threatened. There is a defense mechanism that is activated.
Some incredible defense mechanisms. I mean, you're talking about 17-foot black caiman, crocodiles that with significant size that could rip you in half, anacondas, the largest snake on Earth, bushmasters that can grow up to be 9 to I think even 11 feet long, and I've caught bushmasters that are thicker than my arms.
So for people who don't know, bushmaster snakes, what are these things?
These are vipers. I believe it's the largest viper on Earth.
Venomous.
Extremely venomous, with hinged teeth, tissue-destroying venom. Like if you get bitten by a bushmaster, they say you don't rush and try and save your own life. You try to savor what's around you. Look around at the world. Smoke your last cigarette. Call your mom. That's it.
So that moment of stasis that is life is going to end abruptly when you interact with one of those.
Yeah. I even have this seemingly...
Can I just pause at how incredibly beautiful it is that you could just reach to your right and grab a piece of the jungle?
It's like even this seemingly beautiful little fern. If you go this way on the fern, you're fine. As soon as you go this way, there's invisible little spikes on there if you want to.
Oh, I see. I feel
see
it.
that? So like everything is defended. If you're driving on the road and you have your arm out the side, or if you're on a motorcycle going through the jungle and you get one of these, it'll just tear all the skin right off your body. It's kind of doing that to me now.
So what would you do? Like we're going through the dense jungle yesterday and you slide down the hill, your foot slips, you're sliding down, and then you find yourself staring a couple feet away from a bushmaster snake. What are you doing? You're, for people who somehow don't know, are somebody who admires snakes, who has met thousands of snakes, has worked with them, respects them, celebrates them. What would you do with a bushmaster snake? Face to face.
Face to face. This has happened. I've been there.
It's nice.
I've come face to face with a bushmaster, and there's two reactions that you might get. One is if the bushmaster decides that it's vacation time, if it's sleeping, if he just had a meal, they'll come to the edges of trails or beneath a tree and they'll just circle up, big spiral, big pile of snake on the trail, and they'll just sit there. And one time there was a snake sitting on the side of a trail beneath a tree for 2 weeks. This snake was just sitting there, resting, digesting his food out in the open, in the rain, in the sun, in the night. Didn't matter. You go near it, barely even crack a tongue. Now the other option is that you get a bushmaster that's alert and hunting and out looking for something to eat, and they're ready to defend themselves. And so I once came across a bushmaster in the jungle at night, and this bushmaster turned its head towards me, looked at me, and made it very clear, I'm going to go this way. And so I did the natural thing that any snake enthusiast would do, and I grabbed its tail. Now 11 feet later, by the head, the snake turned around and just said, if you want to meet God, I can arrange the meeting. I will oblige. And I decided to let the bushmaster go.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like that with most animals. You know, a jaguar will turn and look at you and just remind you of how small you are.
Like, what did you see in the snake's eyes? How did you sense that this is not this is going to be your end if you proceed?
His readiness. I wanted to get him by the tail and show him to the people that were there and maybe work with the snake a little bit. As an 11-foot snake, the snake turned around and made it very clear, like, not today, pal. It's not going to happen.
Is it in the eyes and the movement and the tension of the body?
It was the movement and the S of the neck. It was as if you pushed me and I went, let's go, make my day.
Yeah.
Like, he just looked a little bit too ready. He was like, I love this.
Okay. All right. So you know.
You just know. Whereas, like, the snake you met last night.
Yeah. Beautiful snake.
Such a calm little thing. He just focuses on eating baby lizards and little snails and things. And that snake has no concept of defending itself. It has no way to defend itself. So even something the size of a blue jay could just come and just peck that thing in the head and swallow it. And it's a helpless little snake. So it's really, it kind of depends on the animal. It depends on the mood you catch them in. Each one has a different temperament.
The grace of its movement was mesmerizing. Curious almost. Maybe I'm anthropomorphizing, projecting onto it. But it was...
The tongue flicking was a sign of curiosity. He was trying to figure out what was going on. It was like, why am I on this treadmill of human skin? You know, they're just trying to get to the next thing, trying to get hidden, trying to get away from the light.
Also, the texture of the scales is really fascinating. I mean, it's the first snake I've ever touched. It's so interesting. It was just such an incredible system of muscles that are all interacting together to make that kind of movement work, and all the texture of its skin, of its scales. What do you love about snakes? From my first experience with a snake to all the thousands of experiences you had with snakes, what do you love about these creatures?
I think it's when you just spoke about it, that's the first snake you've met, and it was a tiny little snake in the jungle, and you spoke about it with so much light in your eyes. And I think that because we've been programmed to be scared of snakes, there's something wondrous that happens in our brain. Maybe it's just this joy of discovery that there's nothing to be scared of. And whether it's a rattlesnake that is dangerous and that you need to give distance to, but you look at it from a distance and you go, whoa. Or it's a harmless little grass snake that you can pick up and enjoy and give to a child. They're just these strange legless animals that just exist. You know, they don't even have eyelids. They're so different than us. They have a tongue that senses the air, and they, to me, are so beautiful. And I've my whole life been defending snakes from humans, and they seem misunderstood. I think they're incredibly beautiful. There's every color and variety of snakes. There's venomous snakes, there's tree snakes, there's huge crushing anacondas. It's just, of the 2,600 species of snakes that exist on Earth, there's just such beauty, such complexity, and such simplicity. They're just to me I feel like I'm friend with snake, and they rely on me to protect them from my people.
Friend with snake.
Me friend snake.
Me friend snake. You said some of them are sometimes aggressive, some of them are peaceful. Is this a mood thing, a personality thing, a species thing? What is it?
So as far as I know, there's only really 2 snakes on Earth that could be aggressive, because aggression indicates offense. Mm-hmm. And so a reticulated python has been documented as eating humans. Anacondas, although while it hasn't been publicized, they have eaten humans. Every single other snake, from boa constrictor to bushmasters to spitting cobra to grass snake to garter snake to everything else, every single other snake does not want to interact with you. Mm-hmm. They have no interest. So there's no such thing as an aggressive snake once you get outside of anaconda and reticulated python. Aggression could be trying to eat you. That's predation. But for every other snake, a rattlesnake, if it was there, would either go escape and hide itself, or it would rattle its tail and tell us, don't come closer. A cobra will hood up and begin to hiss and say, don't approach me. I'm asking you nicely not to mess with me. And most other snakes are fast, or they stay in the trees, or they're extremely camouflaged, but their whole MO is just, don't bother me. I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be messed with. In fact, all I want to do is be left alone. And once in a while, I just want to eat. And by the way, when you see a snake drink, your heart will break. It's like it's the only thing that's cuter than a puppy. Mm-hmm. Like watching a snake touch its mouth to water, and you just see that little mouth going as they suck water in, and it's like, it's just so adorable watching this scaled animal just be like, I need water.
In a state of vulnerability.
Yeah.
But bro, there's nothing cuter than a little puppy with a tongue, like
a baby ball python.
All right.
Baby king cobra, man.
To take your word.
Baby elephant.
So what are they? They're like at a puddle and they just take it in?
They can be at a puddle and they just take it in. Or one time in India, I was with a snake rescuer, and we found this 9-foot king cobra, this god of a snake. Their Ophiophagus hanna is their Latin name, and they're snake eaters. They're the king of the snakes, the largest venomous snake. And the people that called this snake rescuer, because that's a profession in India, it had gotten into their kitchen or their backyard, and so we showed up and we got the snake, and the snake rescuer, he looked at the snake and he went to me, he said, why do you think the snake would go in a house? And he was quizzing me, and I actually went, I don't know. Is it warm? Is it cold? Like sometimes cats like to go into the warm cars in the winter. And he was like, he's thirsty. He goes, watch this. He took a water bottle, poured it over. Now the snake is standing up. The snake stands up 3 feet tall. This is a huge king cobra with a hood. Terrifying snake to be around. He leans over to the snake, and the snake is standing there trusting him. And he takes a water bottle and pours it onto the snake's nose. And the snake turns up its nose and just starts drinking from the water bottle. Human giving water to snake. Big, scary snake. But this human understood. Snake gets water. Snake gets released in jungle. Everybody's okay.
So sometimes the needs are simple. They just don't have the words to communicate them to us humans.
Yeah.
And is it disinterest or is it fear? Almost like they don't notice us? Or is it where source, the unknown aspect of it, the uncertainty is a source of danger?
Well, animals live in a constant state of danger. Like if you look at that deer that we saw last night, it's stalking through the jungle, wondering what's going to eat it, wondering if this is the last moment it's going to be alive. It's like animals are constantly terrified of that this is their last moment.
Yeah, just for the listener, we're walking through the jungle late at night, so it's darkness except our headlamps on, and then all of a sudden Paul stops, he's like, shh, and he looks in the distance, he sees two eyes. I think you thought, is that a jaguar or is it a deer? And it was moving its head like this, like scared, or maybe trying to localize itself, trying to
see around.
You're doing the same to it. Yeah. the two of you like moving your head, and like deep into the jungle. Like I don't know, it's pretty far away through the trees. You can still see it.
30 feet or so. Yeah,
that's the thing to actually mention. I mean, with the headlamp, you see the reflection in their eyes. It's kind of incredible. Just to see a creature, to try to identify a creature by just the reflection from its eyes.
Yeah, and so the cats, sometimes you'll get like a greenish or a bluish glow from the cats. The deer are usually white to orange, caiman, orange, nightjars, orange. Snakes can usually be like orange moths, spiders sparkle. And so you have all these different, as you walk through the jungle, you can see all these different eyes. And when something large looks at you, like that deer did, your first thing is, what animal is this that I am staring back at? Because through the light, you kind of you see the reflection off the bright light off the leaves. And I couldn't tell at first because actually those big bright eyes, it could have been an ocelot, could have been a jaguar, could have been a deer. And then when it did this movement, that's what the cats do. They try to see around your light. I thought maybe Lex Friedman's here, we're going to get lucky. It's going to be a jag right off trail.
Your definition of lucky is a complicated one.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating process when you see those two eyes trying to figure out what it is, and it is trying to figure out what you are, that process. Let's talk about caiman. We've seen a lot of different kinds of sizes. We've seen a baby one, a bigger one. Tell me about these 16-foot plus apex predators of the Amazon rainforest.
The big bad black caiman, which is the largest reptilian predator in the Amazon except for the anaconda. They kind of both share that notch of apex predator. They were actually hunted to endangered species level in the 70s because they're leather, black scale leather. But they're coming back. They're coming back, and they're huge, and they're beautiful. And I was walking near a lake, and I never understood how big they could get, except for I was walking near a lake last year, and I was following this stream. You know what it's like when you're following a little stream, and there's just a little trickle of water, and all of a sudden this river otter had been running the other direction on the stream. River otter comes up to me, and I swear to God, this animal looked at me and went, "Hey!" And I went, "Hey!" He like didn't expect to see me there. And he turned around, he like did a little spin, started running down the stream. Then he turned around, and you could tell he was like, "Let's go!" And I'm not anthropomorphizing here. The animal was asking me to come with him. So I followed the river otter down the stream. We started running down the stream, and the river otter looks at me one more time, is like, "Yo!" Jumps into the lake. And I'm like, what does he want me to see? Now, in the lake, there's river otters doing dives and freaking out and going up and down and up and down, and they're very excited. They're screaming. They're screeching. All of a sudden, and I've never seen anything like this except for in like